episode 18 of All the Horrible Things, where we are celebrating road trip horror this week because today, the 27th of May, is National Road Trip Day, baby!
I love a good road trip.
As do I. And of course, Memorial Day is what, gets people that extra time and to go out there. Granted,
get on the road.
I think it's kind of tough this year with $7 gas prices. Oh my goodness.
Seriously, that's the one thing that's going to put a damper in people's road trip plans.
That's our horror story, right?
Yeah. You know, it's funny,
Gas
and
prices.
I can connect this to something. But in one of the movies we're going to talk about later, you see in the background what gas prices were in 2001, and it was like $1.30.
I remember that right after we graduated high school, it was as low as 99 cents.
Yeah.
And that was glorious. I
Yeah.
remember just driving just for fun. Joyride, speaking of which, we'll get to later.
Burning money. Just burning money away.
Before we start dipping into these horror movies, though, I'm curious, what was your most memorable road trip that you've taken over the years?
Well, it's interesting because I sort of like bucket those. Like we've taken, family road trips, which, you have fond memories of, but I'm certain in the moment being stuck in the car with your family is not the most fun.
That's something I was thinking about as I was watching these. I realized now a road trip does not appeal to me half as much as it did in my 20s or like late teens. I think at this stage, we don't want to just be cooped up with people like that. We want to listen to our own music and our own podcasts or whatever. I think it becomes increasingly harder as you get older to tolerate road trips.
Yeah, but that's why I'm saying I bucketed them because like I had the family road trips and then I had like friends we would jump in a car, like even like visiting other friends in like the Big Ten colleges. So that you're driving down to University of Illinois or you're driving to University of Iowa to visit friends. Those were always fun road trips. You felt like an adult as a kid, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I remember senior year in high school. My grandpa passed. I got a little bit of chump change, and I immediately bought that old Ford Tempo, if you remember that little white devil. And the first thing I did with it was bring two of my buddies down to my grandpa's like Tampa Bay little house on the water, and it was just us three at like 18 years old, and I felt like such a big shot. I don't know how we got beer, but we did. We did get beer somehow at the ripe age of 18. That's true. That is true.
In Florida, just like gave it away.
Yeah, that was probably the most fun, I would say, because it was the perfect timing. I just got this new little crappy car, and I was putting it to use. But I've had some scary moments on the road. Have you had any scary moments on the road?
Yeah. Well, not necessarily on the road, but part of the road trip. Yeah, I remember. This is probably around 10, 12 years ago. I went with some friends. We were taking a trip to Northern Illinois for a camping trip.
Oh.
And when we got there, we set up camp, and out of nowhere, a motorcycle gang showed up.
Oh, gosh.
There was like
Hell's Angels!
5 dudes in leather. They would just walk up and in the dark onto your campsite. And first they were really just like leaning into like scaring us because they got a kick out of that. And they were joking about how some of them just got out of prison, and like here we are, just a bunch of dudes camping.
Wow.
Just offered them beer to like be cool, and then by the end of it, they ended up being cool guys, but they were really playing it like they wanted to like
steal your old lady.
Yeah, well, no, there was no girls with that. It was just
a
guys trip, and which made it weird. They were like making fun, like just a bunch of guys sleeping in these tents in the woods. We're like, yeah.
Well, yeah, you're a city boy. That's one of the themes that pops up during these road trip horrors is essentially the urban versus the rural. And
I don't remember sleeping all that well that night, though.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I'd be kind of concerned too.
Yeah.
Being ripped off or having stuff stolen, which you see in some of these flicks. As noted, we'll talk about it later, but I just saw the new Wrong Turn from last year, and there's thievery involved there. So that's something I'd be scared of camping for sure. Do you carry like a knife with you or bear spray or anything?
I almost always have a knife on me.
Okay.
Anyway,
just walking the streets of Chicago.
Like a multi-tool, but it's got like a nice knife on it. Yeah.
Oh, nice. I just don't cut my nails. And Do
He's
the
got two
Wolverine thing.
Wolverine, Freddy
Go
Krueger
for the
claws.
eyes, baby. The eyes and the
Yeah,
groin.
there you go.
That's what you do.
Do you have road trip
You know,
scary
I don't
stories?
have nefarious figures that I've dealt with, but I've had a lot of what I felt like were near death experiences in the car on the
Oh
road.
wow.
I
Okay.
remember when I first drove to Los Angeles for that first time, I was in a big old 1979 E150 van, and it was in January. I remember sleeping in the mountains and freezing my butt off. But the next day, after that mountain sleep in Colorado, it's going down the 25, and there was a truck that just seemed to like be suddenly stopping in front of me. And granted, it was kind of far up there, but I got nervous enough to kind of hit the brakes too hard, and the whole van did like a 180
Oh
on the
boy.
highway, and I just got saved by about 3 feet of guardrail. Otherwise, I
Ah,
would have tumbled down and been toast. That was pretty scary. And then in
was
2002, I remember showing up at a party of some friends, and some peripheral friends were gung ho about, we're going to California tonight. We got an extra spot. You want in? And I handed the keys to that tempo I talked about earlier to my friend, and he said, "Bring it back to my house, will you?" And I hopped in the car with these jokers. Didn't really know them. And as we were crossing the Mississippi River, it was a Jeep Cherokee or something. Like the bottom fell out of the car.
oh my god.
Like the car just died right at the Mississippi. But these kids were so gung ho about doing something that I, I suggested, well, what's at the bottom? Maybe this is a sign. What's at the bottom of the old Mississippi? And that was New Orleans. So I talked the guy into selling the car for scrap and buying us all Greyhound tickets down to New Orleans. And one of the guys still lives there from this random trip, which is insane. So
Wow,
that was his
that's
destiny,
impressive.
you know. I lasted about
Yeah,
10 days, 14 days down there before I came back and went to school that year. But the other three, they stayed down
that's
there for a
insane.
while. It is, and one's still there. So, and of course, I've definitely had a flat tire on the highway before, which
Mm-hmm.
scared me. That was in Sacramento. But yeah, no nefarious figures like you. It's always been mechanical for me.
Yeah, I mean, not to. I mean, I think motorcycle gangs are awesome, but when they show up in the middle, when they show up in the middle of the woods when you're camping, it seems a little out of context. It was a bit scary.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm pretty indifferent to motorcycle gangs. I
I
personally
think they're
don't like
cool.
noise pollution, but
Right, right. That
to
doesn't.
each their own.
Right.
Whatever you got to do. It's better than those guys that have the big like trucks that shoot out all that
Oh,
extra smoke
worst.
from the back. That I don't get. That I'm intolerant of. But I could see how riding a motorcycle is like flying. So I can kind
Yeah.
of get what that sensation to be like. I've been on a motorcycle. Have you?
No, I've never have. I just think they're cool.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, I got some family that's into motorcycles. I don't quite get it, but again, to each their own. Well, what we're going to do here with these movies is we kind of broke them down into three categories. Essentially, the popular ones, the ones you've heard of in some way or other. We'll talk about those at the end and kind of decide which is the ultimate of those. But then we have two different tiers. One is like you probably heard of it, you might not have seen it, and
Right.
then we have the ones that you probably have not heard of at all. We're going to talk about whether or not they're worth catching, any notable moments or scenes that we can bring up. And this week we actually watched a couple of these.
Mm-hmm.
I watched Husk and Evidence and Midnight Ride specifically this week. You watched some of those too, right?
I watched all three of those as well.
So of Husk, Midnight Ride, which is old, we're talking 1990 for Midnight Ride. Husk
Yeah.
was the early aughts, and Evidence I think was the early aughts as well.
I think it's like a 2011 or 2013.
Oh,
So
2011. Okay.
yeah.
So let's just kind of run through them. What was your takeaway from Husk, which is a remake of the 1988 film Scarecrows? So Scarecrows are at the heart of Husk.
Right. Well, as I'm watching Husk, I thought it was cool because cornfields can definitely be creepy
For sure.
and scary.
Definitely.
But I didn't necessarily love the lore of these scarecrows. Like one of the characters in this group of friends, who get a flat tire or whatever, and they're stuck on the side of the road. Right. They decide to venture into the cornfield because they one of the friends went missing, but one of the friends in the group can see the I don't even want to say ghost, but he can see the moments in history between the family that lived here, like the origin story of this. And they don't explain why.
Why is he this clairvoyant and
Right.
nobody else can see it? Yeah.
And like I understand the need for that. Like, how else could you introduce that unless you introduce a whole new character, which could get confusing because they're out in the middle of nowhere. But I just didn't necessarily love that. I did find out that I like the filmmaker who went on to make You Might Be the Killer.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I will say I actually did like the production value of it. I thought it looked really slick. It was fun to watch visually.
Right.
Story-wise is where it falls apart for me,
because
it is ultimately about this kind of reincarnated creating scarecrows from your friends sort of thing.
Right.
It's kind of convoluted, but I mean, I'm glad it exists. I kind of want to go back now and watch Scarecrows and see if that did it better. Because I will say, I think Scarecrows is it's a scary like topic to tackle, and I think some movies we're going to talk about later deal with the look of scarecrows even more. Because certainly it goes back to biblical aspects as well. Just having somebody on the cross. There was some good effects in this too. I remember the first undead friend that they find sewing, a scarecrow costume, has like the nails in his fingers. It was
that looked cool.
It did. Production wise, it was good. They just needed a rewrite.
Yeah, but when they continue to use that same device of them finding a friend upstairs, it's lost all of its scariness. And
there was no urgency. The characters are pretty one-dimensional. I don't want to see it again. I remember struggling through it the first time and not really remembering a lot, and then I did revisit it, and I was still like, oh, okay, I see why I didn't retain much of this other than the visuals. But yeah, I would say that's one you could probably skip, but now I am curious about scarecrows, so I might investigate that. Another one we watched this. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, you know what I think a big problem with the film might be is that a good amount of it happens during the day. It takes obviously the time to actually get to nighttime where it could be scarier, but a lot of this happens during the day and not as scary.
That's a good point. Yeah. I think you really have to have a premise that works with daylight, and I don't necessarily think this one does. Because scarecrows, I think, are generally meant to keep away the birds at night.
Correct.
I don't know. I'm not a farmer, so I'm not sure. It didn't really scare me at all. It didn't have moments of fright that it could have, and other movies set in the corn husks have done. What scared me the most is just when you run through corn, you get sliced up, man. I mean, that's like the worst paper cuts ever when you get those.
And just the idea of not knowing where you're at, you get turned around very easily.
Yes. Yeah. I wish they kind of played that up a little more. That being said, did you see that recent Netflix movie, the Cornfield one?
I did, and what was that called? Was that a Stephen King story or a son?
I'm not sure. Yeah, it might have been his son's.
In the Tall Grass, I think it's called.
In the Tall Grass, right?
Yeah.
That was I thought that did a better job of being lost and had the urgency involved with that than Husk did. But
right.
Another kind of crappy one we watched was Evidence.
Yes.
Evidence is found film or found footage.
Correct. And this was a movie I had never heard of. I mean, it has some really
decent cast.
Yes. Stephen Moyer. I forget her name now from
Melissa George.
Is it?
I'm pretty sure it's Melissa George. You're talking about the cops, right? Because ultimately there's the metaframe and then the actual slicing and dicing that occurs.
I thought it was the actor from Silent Hill.
Isn't that Melissa George too?
No.
Maybe I'm mistaken. Okay. She has Melissa George vibes.
Fine. I mean, notable actors in this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate the setup of the movie. Well, you know what? There's two stories going along the same time period here. We've got the found footage story where we've got all these kids who are headed out and they rent a bus, like a mini bus?
Yes, a shuttle bus.
But then you've got the actual procedural going on where you've got these cops putting together the story. And I thought that was actually really kind of fun. What I was telling you earlier is the thing that really bothered me was the juxtaposition of going from one story to the next with the the digital noise that they were including in it was very distracting. I mean, and I love found footage. I don't mind
Right.
shaky camera, but they really went over the top with this.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, whereas Husk I thought was at least visually pleasing, this one was a struggle. Kind of gave me a headache, and I didn't necessarily like the procedural part as much as you did. I felt like it belonged on like a CBS show. You know what I mean? It felt
Yeah.
NCIS or something to me. It didn't feel theatrical enough for me. It felt confined and claustrophobic. But this is our only found footage road trip film, so there's something to that.
Right.
And I will say that I did like the means of murder with this welding tool.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool, and
I mean,
something I hadn't seen before. I mean, the killers
right.
is able to just like take off limbs with this welder, and you see
I
it
mean, that's
sometimes
cool. Yeah.
through essentially what is it, infrared cameras, which again,
Right.
not super fun to look at, but at least it was something kind of unique and I hadn't seen before. I'll give it
Yeah.
that.
That
Uh,
that reminds me of my biggest problem with this movie is that, and this is somebody who works with video, there's no zooming in
no,
and analyzing. Like when Stephen Moyer's character is like, all right, yeah, punch it back 3 frames, go in there, punch in. Then they use some sort of stupid term like not like analyze or something, but it smooths out the video.
right.
It doesn't work like that. And I
Yeah.
hated that. I hate the fact that you created a gimmick to manipulate the footage. It just doesn't work like that.
I'm with you. It's definitely not realistic. But that being said, if there are potential murderers out there, let's let them believe that is a possibility.
Oh yeah, you can do anything with a computer.
Anything can see your soul through video.
Radha Mitchell, that's who the actor is.
Oh, Radha Mitchell. Okay, my bad.
Yeah, they do look a lot alike, though. You're right.
They do
Melissa
have
George.
similarities. My bad on that one. Okay, so evidence is another one you could probably skip unless you're a huge found footage person.
Right. You know what though? Really quick. Very surprised that there's not more road trip found footage movies.
I think it was kind of contrived how they put this one together, and if it wasn't for who the killers are and what they were trying to do, because this one has a lot to do with, you know, fame seeking, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And it's not unlike another one on this list that's kind of lower tier, but they do such better job of it. And we talked about this movie before, and that's A Classic Horror Story from only a couple years ago. The Italian film, where again you have a setup that seems like it's one thing, and then it turns out to be essentially a movie being made, which is going on in both of them. So there's that.
Clever.
Classic Horror Story does it really well, and it has a much better cast. That had the lead from that movie Revenge, which we really liked as well, in A Classic Horror Story.
Right.
And I would completely recommend that one because it's done really well. Some really great graphics and scenes, and just this like church sort of structure, this deified structure that they're dealing with alone. Just the set design is so cool in A Classic Horror Story. And you don't get any of that in Evidence.
Right. And I was gonna say they do such a good job of introducing these characters and how different the characters are that are like put together on this bus.
Yeah. No, it absolutely does. It's almost Canterbury Tale style, like reality. All the characters are so disparate that it just really makes for a good story.
In Evidence, you've got like a teen runaway who's into magic. You're like, what?
Yes. The characters are really weak, and the performances aren't that great in Evidence either. No. Even as much as I like Stephen Moyer, I don't think he's. No. I think he's better when he's being a vampire in True Blood.
Yeah, agreed.
I think the camp is better for him than trying to do procedural stuff. Let's talk about the other one we watched this week.
Oh boy,
which is probably maybe one of the oldest, at least one of the 2 oldest on our whole list here. 1990, Midnight Ride.
Oh my gosh! Now this was a movie that I didn't necessarily know by name, but I knew, or I had heard people talk about Mark Hamill's character in this movie. This movie stars Mark Hamill and Michael Dudikoff, who, when I was a kid, like I looked up to as a B action star.
Really?
Yeah.
What else has he been in that you really liked him in?
Well, he did a series of movies that, if you're familiar with the production company Canon, they made a lot of ridiculous movies in the 80s, but specifically these movies called American Ninja. Michael
Okay,
Dudikoff
I've heard of
played
it.
this American soldier who was like really good
That's
at martial
hilarious.
arts. But if you go back and you watch it, you're like, oh man, he was not that good at martial arts. But he also had
Uh, Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say he also had his own TV show called Cobra.
Oh, okay. All
And
right.
he drove a red, Shelby Cobra, and yeah. Also, I think one of his best performances is in the movie Bachelor Party.
Okay.
He plays like the crazy friend in the Bachelor Party, the Tom Hanks movie.
Oh, that's right, the Tom Hanks flick. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't hate him, but I did hate
Oh.
his character. You know what I
his
mean? I didn't hate what he
character.
did with with the character, but the character itself was just horrible. And I
Well-
really think this movie sends the wrong message as a whole.
100%. Let's talk about the plot a little bit here because I don't want to go too far down here. But this movie starts off really, really weird, strangely.
Yes.
You got Michael Dudikoff's character watching a movie, eating a sandwich, while his wife is in the background packing a bag. Like, it's very
Right.
clear, even for like the audience, to be like, oh, she's leaving him.
Right.
he's
And he kind
oblivious.
of like half notices, but he's more into the sandwich.
Yes, the sandwich and whatever the hell he was watching. Then she goes to the car, which is kind of where the movie literally takes off, and he appears in the front seat.
Right.
And I think this whole like setup of this movie could have been so different if they had a different musical composer.
Oh
Because
my gosh.
the music in this movie is so bad.
It's ridiculous.
It's over the top,
Out of place. Yeah.
Cinemax, early 90s Cinemax.
Right.
Comical.
It's like a soundtrack to another movie. It does not fit any scene.
Correct.
Absolutely absurd.
You know what, though? I'm sorry. The very first scene, this movie starts like right out of the gates with Mark Hamill's character and a rental car
Oh, that's right.
counter, remember? And he doesn't have a
Oh, yeah.
credit card, so she can't rent him the car. Which I was like, the movie started? What? And then they don't show you Mark Hamill's full face. They just like show his mouth. Like, well, we
Right.
know he's in it. Why are you doing this to the character?
That is very strange. And he has a very
Um,
distinguishable mouth as well,
Yes.
So there's really no point to it.
But then there's this generic storyline where the main character's wife is leaving him because he's a cop, and she doesn't like his job and his hours.
He spends more time at his workplace than he does with her in the homestead.
Well, here, which would have been much more of a payoff if he wasn't home when she left. If he was actually
That's true.
working, he's on the
Lounging
couch.
on the couch with a sandwich.
Yes.
You're never home. This is another thing we got to mention is that she was a Russian bride,
Yes.
right? So he
Oh,
got
yeah.
her from Moscow,
Yeah.
saved her from Russia. It's the
Dudikoff
1990s, so
character
there's
very
still a little
casually drops.
strangeness.
He drops. Well, we got you out of Russia, and then what does that
Yeah.
mean?
So they're
Oh.
actually loving each other as in question as it is. Is she a piece of property to him? It is weird. She's trying to leave him essentially for
Right.
seems multiple reasons. He
Again.
sucks and he's never there, but he's always there.
Which is a terrible setup when she's doing it when the husband's home, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. It's ridiculous. I mean, the writing was piss poor in this.
oh man,
But what's so stupid is then he's like, all right, well, I'm going with you then wherever you're going. And then he's like, how about we just get some ice cream? You always feel better after we get you some ice
he's
cream.
placating her with some ice cream,
Yes, it was so patronizing.
like a child.
Um, But then what's ridiculous is like he thinks he's won her over, and she drives him in front of the ice cream joint. He gets out, and then she just drives away. He's like, "Oh wow, I didn't see that coming." And then he steals his buddy's cop car.
Yeah, he asks
Too?
his
It's
buddy to
like-
go get him a burger at Burger King. It's very clearly
He
Burger
like
King.
totally does the same thing that his wife did to him, tricks him into then ganking the car away from him. How many
Which-
cars does he go through in this movie?
3 or 4 maybe.
Yeah.
The funniest part about this scene though, it makes me think that they like did a guerrilla film like shooting at Burger King because
Yeah,
were they okay with that? And there's just massive.
that's a
Burger
good
King logo in
question.
the background.
I don't see Burger King wanting to be affiliated with this movie
No.
based on the things that happen. But we don't know for sure that he's nefarious until he kills a woman and pops out her fake eye and sucks on that eyeball.
Oh,
Makes a
my
little
God.
necklace out of it and is sucking on this little plastic eyeball. Because we're getting ahead of ourselves here.
Yeah.
She drove away from her husband. he's a hitchhiker, and she picks him up because he seems sweet as a button.
Right.
But then, of course, he turns out to be this homicidal maniac who wants to get back to his psychiatrist for some reason. It's unclear because he makes him feel good. He said,
well,
he
it makes him feel good, but he really wants her to go see the doctor.
Right. He wants to give her electroshock therapy so that
she
can be. Yeah, exactly. He wants to brainwash her into being into him, which is super weird because he keeps saying, "You remind me of my sister. You remind me of my sister."
Yeah.
And his sister, essentially, this is the basis of him being a whack job himself, was murdered by their mother. And the way that it's explained is that she used a butcher knife like a comb on his sister. And
so bizarre.
I'm still trying to figure out how that is. It doesn't seem like it's a scalping. It seems like, I don't know. But that's how it's described. And I don't exactly know how that would work. But
we also learned, though, that he would cuddle with his sister. And then he said the mom made it seem like it was dirty. Like he just
how does Mark Hamill go from one of the most popular franchises ever, Star Wars, to then only a few years later taking on this role that is so embarrassing? Like,
well, not a lot of people saw Mark Hamill as a leading man. I mean, George Lucas did for Luke Skywalker, obviously, but yeah, he doesn't have many leading roles, and he really kind of goes the voice acting route.
Right. Okay, and that's what I want to talk about
too. By the way,
yeah, absolutely. He is the voice of Joker in the Batman animated series, and I see the origin of what he did with that character in this movie. And I'm going to say it's a terrible movie, but Mark Hamill's performance is worth watching it for because it's so over the top. And if you are a Joker fan from Batman animated series, you're going to hear the laugh. You're going to see a similar smile. I think his performance alone made it. I got through it because I found him so amusing. Oh, yeah. Even though it's certainly by no means like good acting, but it was compelling acting. I guess you could put it that way. Yeah, you couldn't look away, like a car crash sort of thing.
Because our female lead was not good at all.
Oh my god. Well, she's from Russia. It just seemed like she had an accent to begin with, but then that accent kind of came and went.
I was going to say, there was times where I didn't know if she was from Russia.
Yeah. So he was like watching a car crash, which I think brings us on to our last one on this list, unless you want to say something about Midnight Ride.
The thing that I would say that was kind of enjoyable about Midnight Ride is that it does move quickly, and it does jump from vehicle to vehicle.
That's true.
And it kind of stays on the road almost, you know?
That's true. This one, I think, more than any other of these movies, is just rooted in this trip.
Yeah.
On the road trip, 100%.
On this Midnight Ride.
I will agree with you that it does move pretty swiftly, necessarily so, because
and then
there's not a lot.
Randomly, the doctor's Robert Mitchum. Like this, clearly Robert Mitchum at this point was just like kind of taking roles wherever you can get him.
Right. I mean, if you sell it as, the star of Star Wars is in it, you want to do this, Mitchum. And I mean, granted, he was probably one of the better aspects of it too, even though he didn't have a lot to do.
No. I almost wish that they had introduced him like the start of this movie. Like, Anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, he does end up actually doing a little electroshock therapy on this woman too, which was just that's what I want to get to. It moves fast, except at the end in the final fight between the two, it felt like the Family Guy scene where he's fighting the big chicken, because it just went over like across the whole hospital. It never ended. It was the longest fight scene I think I've seen in a horror movie.
Well, it's clear like that the director had seen Die Hard and saw Bruce Willis in the vents. And he's like, "Oh, I'm going into the vents too."
Right.
And he puts
rides down. The vents. Oh god. Then you got Hamill riding down the stairs in like a little go-kart thing.
Oh my god, yeah, where did he get
ramming
that?
into him? I don't know. There was a lot of smoke too. It was just it's a beautiful B movie. I mean, it's a movie you want to create a drinking game to, just have in the background and laugh at, because that's all you're gonna get from this flick. In just the final thing on this one, of course they have to give you this like denouement where it seemed like Hamill was dead, And then it
Mm-hmm.
turns out he's still alive and he's in the
Yeah, or
wheelchair.
is
And
he?
again, you're not showing Hamill, you're showing the wheelchair, even though everyone with half a brain knows that this is Hamill. And then
Yeah.
he's in the elevator
Well, again, the
with our.
music too just cues it up. Like,
Well, but yeah, this is kind of the main point of it, though. It's sending the wrong message because she's trying to get away from her husband who's neglectful. And then in the end, only because she's comparing him to a homicidal maniac, now she wants to be with
yeah,
him again and
it
is
pushes
willing
it,
to.
it pushes her right back to the husband. I will
Right.
say, at least the husband said he's willing to like leave his job. At
Yes.
least there was that. But yeah, it
Right.
is the wrong message. You're
Which,
trying to escape something, and it's like, yeah, well, at least he's not as bad as that guy.
I mean, after stealing the cop car, he might not have a job anyway. So maybe
Right,
it boiled
right.
down to that. But yeah. The last one on this list, I don't know if it quite qualifies as horror, but it's definitely um, deranged, is Cronenberg's Crash, which deals with
Mm-hmm.
people with a psychological, psychosexual passion for car
Yeah.
crashing that kind of gets them hot and bothered.
James Spader, right? James Spader.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I remember seeing it when I was younger, and maybe
Same.
just being too young to really quite
Figure
appreciate
out.
it. I
Yep.
don't. Maybe it wasn't that good. Granted, Cronenberg got a new one coming out,
Oh
which
yeah.
I'm very excited about, called Future Crimes.
Yeah. People are already walking out of it. That's a good sign.
Really outstanding.
Oh
Good.
yeah.
Kristen Stewart, and I guess Surgery has sexual connotations in this
Yeah.
new one in Time
Yeah.
Crimes. So his old one, Crash, had the car crashes leading to the flesh sins. Anyways, so those are kind of the first tier ones that hit her, you can see or not, with the exception of Classic Story, which I highly suggest. The rest are kind of not known for a reason, I would say.
Yeah, I would say some of these are a little easier to come by. Classic Horror Story, I believe, is still on Netflix.
Nice.
Midnight Ride was streaming for free on Tubi. And,
right. And what was that, like 480p? It was such a crappy version. It was really hard to just watch because of how grainy it was.
Agreed.
It was like
and it doesn't necessarily
old VHS tape.
It doesn't deserve a remastering, but I would say it was very low res.
For his just iconic performance and essentially being the precursor to his Joker, I think it should be remastered just for that. It's comical, you know?
Yeah.
Give it to Mystery Science and they'll do something with it. But let's talk about the middle grounders here, the not top of the charts road trip horror. And granted, some of them are like really, really good. I just don't think they might be old enough for it to be known.
Sure.
So that's where we're putting them in this category. Starting with, we've talked about it a few times, I think, on the podcast, is Near Dark.
Yeah.
Which is a vampire road trip horror. That's amazing. That just
that's all I gotta say about that one.
Yeah, Catherine Bigelow hits it out of the park there. I think that's my favorite of hers by far. This is during the time when she's kind of competing with her dude, Mr. Cameron.
That's right.
And frankly, I gotta say, I think Near Dark and maybe Aliens are their two best for me. For Cameron, it's Aliens, and Near Dark, I think it's Bigelow.
I'd agree with that. Unless you're a huge like Point Break fan.
Yeah, which I'm not. I like it.
It's fun, but Near Dark is a better movie. Yes,
for sure, and that's such a genre bender. Yeah, I think people kind of forget that it is a road trip movie, and we're dealing with like familial bonding through vampirism. Pretty much, they are very supportive of one another as vampires. So it's unique. It's kind of the precursor for stuff like True Blood, where you really give humanity to vampires in a way that it hadn't been done before. And of course, we have Death Proof, which is a Tarantino movie, which you would think it would have a little more acclaim and a little more, clout around it. But I think it's kind of forgotten because it was part of that double feature, right?
Yeah, with Planet Terror and and Death Proof. Yeah, Robert Rodriguez and Tarantino.
I remember enjoying it, but not having any interest in seeing it again.
No, I think the best thing about this movie is Kurt Russell's stuntman Mike. His character is so interesting. He's kind of like your Rutger Hauer psychopath from The Hitcher, which is another great road trip movie, or just an obsessive individual who I kind of feel like he gets off on this as well.
Yes, again, we have sexual gratification. involved in the road. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, some people, there is a fetishism with cars for
Oh
a
yeah,
certain
yeah.
generation, you know? And I think he's kind of, I think Kurt Russell's age is appropriate for that sort of fetishism. Um, I mean, it's beautiful. It's a Tarantino movie. Like,
Oh
look,
yeah.
production wise, it's great.
Visually, yes.
It's just like there's no one to root for, and I don't know. Yeah, it's that's why it's in the middle. It's in the middle ground because it's production wise is great. I just think it's probably Tarantino's worst.
Yeah, I think if you were ranking his movies, it would probably be towards the bottom there.
Now, there's an Australian one we put on this list, Wolf Creek, which I don't remember having seen. It's possible,
Yeah,
but you have.
yeah, I've seen it. I've seen Wolf Creek, and I know that they've got some sequels in there, and I believe they did a TV series for Wolf Creek, which
Oh,
might
wow.
be on Shutter. I don't think I've gotten into too many series on that platform yet, but yeah, it's a really cool movie about some girls who break down in the outback, and you kind of, this is equivalent to like breaking down in the American Southwest. You will take help from wherever you get it, and there's this man who's he's got a great performance, but he's kind of like when you see him, you wouldn't necessarily want to like trust him, but he's your only hope.
Yeah.
He's a really big character, and he brings them back to his place, and he ties them up. And I don't want to get into too many spoilers, but yeah, it's a fun movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to revisit that one because I think I saw it, but I just don't really remember it that well. So, does it distinguish itself as something different than, say, like a Wrong Turn or even
Well,
Texas Chainsaw?
yeah, there's no I mean, the monsters really here are human.
Okay.
There's nothing. It's just about I imagine this crazy character out in the middle of nowhere may have been led astray by boredom.
I got it. Okay. All right. Well, it's good that we got an Australian one on the list.
Yeah.
Let's talk about one that we both love from our youth.
Yeah.
Called Breakdown with
Yes.
Kurt Russell again, right?
Yes, this is Kurt Russell, and this kind of transitions nicely from talking about your car being broke down in the middle of nowhere. And this one takes place about a husband and wife whose car breaks down, and it's really, really bizarre because you want to trust somebody who's willing to help you, who volunteers to take your wife to the diner, which is just down the road, to call for a tow truck to come back. But hours and hours pass, and Kurt Russell finally just needs to like, where's my wife?
Right. And we're talking about J.T. Walsh here as one of the
yes.
nefarious characters. And J.T. Walsh,
he's awesome.
Rest in peace, because he is such an icon on the screen.
Yeah.
He's got such presence. Anything he does, I think, is pretty freaking awesome. Agreed. I think he's why I remembered the movie more than anything.
Yeah, he is the guy who offers help, and like this is a really messed up movie where they play with sanity, like, are you sure you lost your wife?
Yes, gaslighting before people were using that term.
Yeah,
essentially,
that's exactly
a lot of gaslighting going on.
And there's a lot of like maybe your wife wanted to leave you type of a thing, and
right.
Then he finds out that there is something going on, and they want money for the wife, and it just turns into this really great revenge rescue type movie.
Yeah, it's more of a thriller with horror elements.
Yeah, yes.
What I mean, from the mindset of our main character, it's a horrific experience.
Oh my god, yeah.
Certainly, Kurt Russell's much more relatable and sympathize worthy than he is in Death Proof. So you can get on board with what's going on in his head in this one more so than Death Proof. But yeah, I think it's one that people might not remember as well, and they should go back and check it out. Breakdown.
That's one of those movies. If it's on TV, and I'm like, I have to watch this.
Yes,
I have to watch it.
I'm with you. So Nocturnal Animals you had brought up to me before, and I hadn't seen it, but I have seen it since.
Yes,
I absolutely loved it. And the best part of the movie is when Amy Adams' character is reading her ex's novel, and it involves a scene on the road, where things go bad. And honestly, this is where the kid who's from Kick-Ass, he's about to play Kraven the Hunter too in the new Spider-Man, if I'm not mistaken, or no, in his own villain movie. Is the big bad in this, and he does such a great job essentially abducting wife and the daughter of the character within the story
right.
And the way that it's done is just really scary. I feel like it's the best part of the movie in terms of emotional
Oh, the stakes
output.
are
Yeah, the stakes, exactly.
Yeah, and yes, I mean, I think everyone in this movie's performance is just fantastic. And I think I mentioned this last time. This is like a Tom Ford, like not this was his first film.
Wow. Yeah, it was amazing. I can't believe it had slipped under my radar because it was great. Gyllenhaal's great in it. And yeah, Amy Adams is usually pretty darn good too.
Yeah, I can't think of the actors.
Aaron Taylor Johnson,
There it
finally.
is.
Yes, Aaron Taylor Johnson is our big bad in it. I
Yeah,
think
he's
he
great.
probably has used this role to have captured this role as Craven, who's, a hunter of Spider-Man, wants to, he hunts mankind. So that should be good because he had some scary moments in it. He was a bad dude. He was a bad dude in Nocturnal Animals.
I mean, it should be good, but if it's in the Spider-Verse, I mean, oof, I just watched Morbius. Let me just tell you.
Yeah, that is the problem. It's a Sony. It's going to be a Sony one, so that's not hopeful. So, yeah, even the Venoms I didn't really love that much.
No.
I don't know. They did collab though on the actual good Spider-Man one, Sony, but I guess they just probably tossed money and demanded royalties or whatever. But you're right. There's not a lot of hope for it. But given his performance in Nocturnal Animals, I'm going to stay optimistic. Craven the Hunter was one of my favorite Spider-Man villains, so I'm really hoping they don't get it wrong. So let's talk about this one that came out right before the pandemic raged through the globe, and that's Russell Crowe's in Unhinged. It didn't get great reviews, but as a fan of movies like Falling Down, I liked it. I enjoyed it. I got through. I didn't want to like abandon it at all because I thought his performance was compelling, and he's essentially hunting down this woman that insulted him on the road. He's got the ultimate road rage character is what we're dealing with here. And Unhinged, he's a murderer, and he's fun to watch. As the bad guy.
As a bad guy, and I know that the weight he had put on for another role really kind of just brought this other character for this movie into a different Russell Crowe type character, and the movie from start to finish is just like nonstop.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good action. It's good action horror. I can't fault it too much. I mean, it's not super dynamic, but for what it is, I went into it knowing what to expect, and it gave me exactly what I wanted in that time when I was watching it.
Yeah, fun Friday night movie.
Now, one I remember watching back in my Blockbuster days that I didn't know what to expect, and I watched it specifically just for the cast, turned out to be one of my favorites, and that's California with a K.
Yeah.
And we have a serious cast in this one. We got Brad Pitt, Juliette Lewis, and David Duchovny.
Yeah, David Duchovny.
And it's a really cool premise. It's actually something I wanted to ask you about after. Let's just mention the premise really quick. You have David Duchovny and his girl essentially going cross country to spots where serial killers have done their deeds, and he's got his girl does photography. He's writing
the book, right? Yeah,
right. He's writing the book about it, and then of course comes along Juliette and Brad Pitt, who are horrible.
Yes,
and they latch on to them, and essentially, is it a hitchhiker situation? I forget how they actually.
That's a great question, and I think
have to go back and check that out.
And yeah, they really just kind of manipulate them.
Yeah, they glom onto them. At first, they seem like, okay, all right, everything's chill, and they could actually help us, and then they turn out to just be. I mean, Juliette Lewis, I think, is fresh off of Natural Born Killers at this, so she's in that role of just scary lady. But I think it's one that of Brad Pitt's especially that people just have dropped the ball on, forgotten about, and it's good. I mean, it's reminiscent. It was before Seven came out, but it gave me Seven vibes. I remember seeing it around the same time I saw Seven and just associating the two for some reason, just because of the whole serial killer angle.
Yeah.
And I remember it was slick. The production was good. I can't remember who directed it, but it's a decent movie. California with a K. I think a lot of people just haven't heard of it.
No,
that's why it's in the middle tier.
But you don't really get to see Brad Pitt as a villain a lot,
Right.
And I think he did a really great job in this.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of, I know in 12 Monkeys, he's sort of villainous. And that's why I think he was nominated for that supporting role in 12 Monkeys.
Yeah, he was.
But
Yeah.
he should do more bad guys because he does great in California. He can be scary for sure. Um, take the route of Ethan Hawke lately, who seems to be doing nothing but big bads.
Yeah, it's fun.
Really quick, let's just kind of talk about the Rob Zombie ones because they always seem to add an element of road trips. You got House of a Thousand Corpses, where you
Right.
have these hapless young people who are not unlike California, going around to document these
These sites.
strange sites.
Yeah. Of like the strange and macabre. You're like,
Strange and macabre, yes.
and you could really see that House of a Thousand Corpses was Rob Zombie's sort of like a love letter to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Yes, 100%.
And it delivers. I mean, this movie.
Oh my gosh, it's one of the scariest movies, if you ask me. Like Texas
Yeah.
Chainsaw is the OG, but I think House of a Thousand comes as close as you can to that pseudo premise, and bringing something really new and unique to it. And I think a lot of it has to do with Sherry Moon Zombie because
Yeah,
his wife is
absolutely.
such a character.
This movie has a fantastic cast, and there is a couple comedians in there that you forget about. That Chris Hardwick's in there,
Yep.
and so is Rainn Wilson.
Yes. Yeah. And what happens to Rainn Wilson in it is pretty
Turns into-
unforgettable.
Yeah, something you've never seen before. A weird
Fish man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a
It's super gross, but
man.
it's one of the horrors that I've gone back to often, because I think it does such a good job. So you got a lot of the same characters in his follow-up called Devil's Rejects that deals with them essentially abducting a band that's going across country with their music, sharing their music. So it's kind of interesting in that the road trippers in the first movie, House of a Thousand, come to them. They find people on the road in the second one.
Right.
And then the third one, Three from Hell, they're forced to go on a road trip themselves because they break Sherry Moon Zombie out of jail and have to flee the country. So you get to see the villains on the road doing their own road trip, and Three from Hell. And I think the quality of the movies does go in the order in which they were created. House of a Thousand, Devil's Rejects, and Three from Hell. All worth watching. But yeah, House of a Thousand takes the cake.
I totally agree, and I think it's just because it's a little bit more, I don't want to say grounded, but it taking place less of a road trip may have served it well, because when he does the road trip, it kind of goes off the rails. But I mean, the characters are what make these. I mean, you got Sid Haig, R.I.P., and Bill Moseley, who plays Otis, the Otis character, is a main character in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. So that's another reason that Rob Zombie really wanted to create his own universe, but so influenced by
that is a good point. I think what made the first one so effective is that it was their territory, they were in control of it, and then in the subsequent ones where they're going out into the real world, there is the scary factor that there's still horrifying figures out in the real world.
Yes,
but they don't have the background. They seem like the foreign elements more so than the kids, which I guess kind of does take away a little from the horror. But let's talk about the top dogs, dogs of road trip horror.
There's a good chance you may have seen some of these.
If one would hope. Yeah. If you're listening to a horror podcast, you got to see these ones.
Yeah.
Let's start with the one that you probably have seen. I don't necessarily think it's the best movie, though, and that's Joyride, which I rewatched this week.
Correct.
I love Steve Zahn. I think Lily Sobieski is decent. Yeah. Paul Walker is always Paul Walker. Yeah. R.I.P. again. Yeah. I didn't like the soundtrack in it. Granted, J.J. Abrams is a producer on this. So it is well created. It is well produced.
Well produced.
But what's your issues with it?
Well, you got some just weird holes in it. I mean, well, for starters, Steve Zahn's character, a brother, they haven't seen each other. It's established they haven't seen each other for about 5 years. And Steve Zahn looks at Paul Walker like it's been longer than that. It just, that may have been an actor's choice because he needed to justify how out of touch they are. They don't come across as brothers at all in this.
No.
Maybe long lost friends or just a reconnection. Right. I don't think Steve Zahn just putting the CB radio in that car makes sense. I kind of wish there would have been more of an explanation, like that they were just bored and like because Paul Walker comes back and also it sounds like they've got like an infinite amount of money in this movie. They get the car like fixed whenever you needed to.
Especially because he picks up Steve Zahn out of jail. He bails him out of jail.
Yeah.
So I don't know how Steve Zahn has like
apparently
much money at all.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't bail himself out. So I don't know.
No.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. It just seemed like Steve Zahn's character, who as an actor is the most likable of the three here,
100%.
is made to be so unlikable in this in just kind of a shoddy way, I would say. But yeah, because that's the premise. He's like, he forces Paul Walker, his brother, into pranking people on the road with the CB radio, and it goes too far where he pretends to be this lusty woman candy cane, and via the CB contacts the wrong guy on the road, Rusty Nails,
right? Which is voiced by Ted Levine.
Yes,
and
the killer from Silence of the Lambs.
Yes, his voice is just so good. Also, the dad in the Hills Have Eyes remake.
Oh wow! Yeah. Oh yeah. Speaking of this list right here, there's some good moments in it though.
Yes. It is a
as
fun
far as
movie.
Road trip movies, we were talking about how ultimately this is the one with the longest road trip.
Yeah.
Because you have him going from Berkeley to Salt Lake City where he picks up his brother, to Boulder where they pick up Lily Sobieski, and ultimately they're trying to get to Newark, which is their home. But certainly Rusty Nails makes that hard for them.
Yes.
And that car goes through a lot and is still ticking. I don't know how that crappy old car survives as it does.
It's American made, that's why.
Did you like any of the characters in Joyride?
You know, I think Paul Walker's character is redeemable. I think,
I think so.
The character may not have been all that well written, but he's just a likable guy who clearly just really likes this girl. That's his only real reason. Like, he's doing his brother a solid by trying to like pull the family back together. But
right, his brother's such a dick that he's essentially trying to hit on her himself.
Yes,
which is not great.
Which is so weird.
Yeah.
But Paul Walker's character from the get-go takes his plane ticket, redeems it for cash, buys a car, which was a great price, $1,100 for that old car that runs pretty well, and makes it through the movie until the gasoline scene. But he just wants to be the good guy. You could just tell. And although his brother pushes him down the wrong path.
Yeah, I do say I think Paul Walker could have been a good actor down the line if he had kept at it. Now, if he was able to keep at it.
Right.
I see some potential in Paul Walker, and I think Joyride is a good example of where you see what he could have been.
Yeah.
It wasn't given. Because I'm not a Fast and the Furious guy, but I remember he's in this, I think one called Running Scared. It's really a good movie. So yeah, it is a shame that he didn't last longer than he did, but I think Joyride is one of the movies that he's associated with the most next to Fast and the Furious, which interestingly is another car-based movie.
Yeah, I think you're right.
He's the gearhead dude. Can you remind me? I'm forgetting what happened to the girl that was Lily Sobieski's roommate,
Chloe,
which Rusty Nails.
I think her name is Chloe.
Chloe. He kidnaps her, right,
Yes.
to kind of get them to continue to play along. Yeah. What happens to her? For some reason, is escaping. Does she get saved?
She does. She does get saved. They find her at the end when you don't, spoiler alert, they don't ever apprehend Rusty Nail.
Right.
But they find Chloe that she's in the truck, I think.
Okay.
She definitely gets rescued. Yeah. The thing that they don't explain to you though is that like you see her, you're introduced to her. She drives off in her nice BMW convertible. You think that's it, and then we just hear her in the background. Like so clearly, Rusty.
Yeah,
Nail,
I don't know how Rusty Nail is able to move around as he does in this movie, given the amount
stealthily.
Of miles that it takes place over.
Well,
that is a whole.
They try to justify it by saying that the distance between a shorthand radio is like 5 miles. So you're supposed to believe that he has been within 5 miles of them this entire time.
Fair. I mean, the setup is good too. When essentially Steve Zahn pins it on the guy next door who was kind of a dick to
Yeah.
them at the motel, and
Gets
he
his
ends up getting
jaw
his
ripped.
jaw
Yeah.
ripped off. That's gruesome. That's where it does really have horror elements in it.
Yeah.
And it's scary to be on the road and there's like one truck behind you, at night. I hate driving at night. Not my
Right.
favorite thing to do. So I think it does a good job of capturing what's scary about the road and specifically driving at night too.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
Let's talk about Wrong Turn. You've seen the OG, and I've seen the remake that just came out last year. Tell me about the original one that came out early aughts, right?
Yeah, I think it's 2003. And you know what? When I was just it's been a while. I remember seeing this movie in the theater, and I remember seeing it a couple times since then. And I'm a fan. It's just a fun, silly movie. But when I was going over it again in my head, it kind of reminded me. We were talking about the Friday the 13th remake from 2009, where
Yeah.
you've got these kind of like douchebag guys, but then you've got like this good guy. So the plot of this movie is that the quote unquote good guy that I'm talking about, his character, I think his name is Chris, actually, is driving cross country for a job interview. And I believe, not to, pun intended, wrong turn, but I think he has to get off the road for something. He's a flat tire, whatever, and he runs into this group of friends. You've got Eliza Dushku and Jeremy Sisto, who's great. Emmanuel Sharik, man, these are all my early 2000 crushes. Not Jeremy Sisto, but no, I actually really, really like Jeremy Sisto.
Jeremy Sisto's awesome. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, but my two crushes, Emmanuel Sharik and Eliza Dushku. There's a group of friends who I think they're just road tripping to go camping or something, but they also, take the wrong turn. They go down I don't know if it's a shortcut or whatever, but then they run into this group of this kind of reminds you of The Hills Have Eyes, where it comes in, where they're, I don't know if they're inbred or whatever, but they are not fully functioning humans.
Right.
And the cool thing that I liked about this, though, is that they hunt these humans with bow and arrows. It's really great scenes with like.
So they hunting them for meat? Are they hunting them for pleasure?
They're hunting them for
okay.
I believe, to eat.
That is not the case in the new one at all. It does sound like there's some similarities, and it does start in this new one, 2021 version, as the road trip through the Appalachian Mountains. But then they get out of the car and they go on the Appalachian Trail. And the wrong turn in the new one is they take the wrong turn in the trailhead. They kind of dig into the woods toward, it sounds like a similar scenario in the first one, where you have these people who are part of the foundation. It's this group that kind of, when the Civil War was percolating, they're like, well, screw that. We're going to let them kill each other, and we're going to be the foundation of what the new America becomes. So again, like you're talking about, they do wear skulls of dead animals, and they do use bow and arrows, but they see themselves as more civilized than contemporary man, in that they aren't obsessed with what doesn't matter from their perspective. That being said, even though it's too long, it's way too long. It's like there's two movies in one, because you have Matthew Modine, who's the father of one of the girls that ends up, getting kidnapped and then turned into one of them. Essentially, they give him the option: you become one of us, the foundation, or we're going to kill you. Because actually, we weren't going to kill her. They were going to put her in the dark. They were going to essentially burn out her eyes and put her into this cave where they do feed her, but she's just stuck in the blackness in the cave with other people they've done this to.
That's their form of justice. Okay.
There is some really good kills in it. There's some really decent effects in it too. I mean, there's a one moment in it when they do first veer off, where it's like Indiana Jones with the boulder, except it's this ginormous tree trunk that's just rolling down the hill at them all. And it's done so well. And of course, one of the dudes gets crushed against a tree, and it's super graphic and gross. But just the scene of the log coming at them, I thought was just shot really, really cool. Granted, this new Wrong Turn has gotten crap reviews. It's not doing well on Rotten Tomatoes and the like. But I'll admit, I did watch it on VLC with a little faster pace than otherwise might have. That might have helped it. It might have been intolerable if I watched it at the normal pace.
Sure.
But I enjoyed it. I did, and I didn't really hate any of the characters. I thought they were pretty well fleshed out.
Yeah.
And even the characters that seem like the hicks in the town near the Foundation, they're redeemable too. Like even the pseudo bad guys become redeemable at the end. I didn't hate it, and I see why it was made. But I am curious to go back and watch the Dushku one, especially if they're hunting down people to eat them,
Yeah.
because that
Well,
is not the case in the new one.
yeah. I mean, I very clearly remember them like wanting to like chop these people up, and I mean, I think it's left to your own devices. Like, oh yeah, they're gonna eat them.
Right, right. Cannibal apocalypse style.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think you need to watch it. I think you need to watch.
I think I will.
Sure.
I think I will as soon as I like come across it.
And Matthew Modine kind of gives it a little bit of cred, I gotta say. Especially, I mean, he's a big shot now. New Stranger Things coming out.
Yeah,
we'll probably be talking about that very soon.
Mm-hmm.
I think he gives it a little bit of gravitas, and the fact that he's this like really tenacious. It's like Liam Neeson in Taken, but the horror version of Taken, sort of
Gotcha.
thing. He's going to save his daughter,
That's fun.
and she's been kind of brought into the fold. And when he shows up, does she stick with them or try and break free with her dad, sort of thing?
That's fun. It's a fun.
Too long, but worth a look. Let's talk about Jeepers Creepers, because I remember seeing that end of high school, beginning of college.
I definitely watched this in the theater, and I definitely rewatched it like every other year. You know, it's just a fun movie, and I think has a lot to do with the cast, your brother and sister duo,
right? You got Justin Long, and then you got the girl from Roswell, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Sherry Appleby or something like that. Sorry, she's also from Unreality, I think, that show about reality shows.
Right.
Which is good, actually.
Now, this is a road trip story. Kind of reminds you of Joyride, where I believe the brother and sister are like driving back home for the holidays, for Thanksgiving, and I don't think they go to the same school or whatever, but they're close enough to where they're carpooling home. And I just remember thinking like, oh my God, this feels like they shot it in Illinois or Iowa, because it's got that just very flat land look of just green cornfields. The cool thing about this movie though is they really introduce your villain kind of like out of nowhere, like Jeepers Creepers truck, which is almost like the second, you know, you've got Jeepers Creeper and you've got his vehicle. His vehicle almost seems like a monster of its own. But, you know, there's like a road rage moment where he just kind of comes up and like bumps their bumper and they're freaking out. They drive off the road and he just keeps going, you know, and the license plate, this is my favorite part. The license plate said, beating you. And then later in the movie, you find out it was like be eating you. Yeah. But yeah, they find that giant pipe and they go like, you know, they find those bodies, like he's dumping bodies down this pipe. And then you find out the lore, which is fun because they bring in this woman who's a clairvoyant. And she just knows everything about Jeepers Creepers. But she's like, I've seen you too, your brother and sister, you know, in my visions. You got to get out of here, type of a thing. But they also want to do the right thing and make sure that, you know, they can save people here. But the lore was cool that the Jeepers Creepers monster like appears every 20 something years out of nowhere. He can fly. He's got some really cool weapons that he can like decapitate a human head and like one.
Yeah, I remember his design being very cool.
Yeah. The most upsetting thing about this movie is what happened off screen. And it's almost like a horror movie of its own. It's like the director of Jeepers Creepers 1, 2, and possibly 3 has many accusations of like I don't want to say pedophilia, but like he's like has cases of like abuse up against him, and it made me like almost hate the franchise, even though like a lot of people probably had nothing to do with it. Yeah.
Yikes.
But I've heard a rumor that they're relaunching this franchise.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, the name itself is great, and I remember
the second movie was super fun. It's a road trip of its own. It's the high school football team driving from like across the state or whatever, and it happens on the school bus.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it's so much fun. So much fun. Yeah. But yeah, it just feels kind of like Joyride in that sense. They've got the old muscle car. They're driving across the country. Except there's a monster, an actual monster in this one.
Yes, which you love. And remind me, he wants the eyes too. Eyes are
He
part of it,
wants
right? Jeepers Creepers,
he wants
Keepers.
everything. He's got different things from different people, whether it's your
Mm.
eyeballs or your tongue. Or,
Oh wow,
yeah,
lovely,
yeah,
lovely.
yeah. Very
Well, let's
gross.
kind of go over the last two, or actually, we got three left here, but we've talked a lot about the Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah,
So I
we
don't think we got
have.
to dig too much into that. We got a whole
No.
cast about Texas Chainsaw. Go back and listen to that one if you want. Only thing interesting I want to say is in the Texas Chainsaw, similar to what goes on in the zombie movies that we talked about, is you got the victims taking a road trip in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning, you have him as part of the road trip himself.
Right.
Leatherface, right? He
Right.
actually goes on the road trip too. So that's something that's a little interesting in terms of the road trip and how that affects him. But let's talk about The Hills Have Eyes because both the original and the remake are great.
Yeah. Um.
Really good movies dealing with essentially urban versus rural again,
Right.
and certainly the nuclear angle because you're dealing with humanoids but that have been affected by radiation
Yeah.
and that do eat people, right? Aren't they snarfing on the people, or
I believe so.
are some of them at least?
Some of
I just
them.
remember there are some of the most graphic kills in this, and there's certainly some horrific rape stuff that goes on
Mm-hmm.
in this too.
Yeah.
It does deal with, you know, future and past and how one's like legacy has been corrupted, while you have these, the rich family with the RVs not been affected by it. So it's like almost revenge
Yeah.
on normalcy in
It's
a
very
way.
political.
Yes, it is.
Even in the remake, the son-in-law character is very liberal, and I believe Ted Levine's character isn't.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
there's just a lot of talk about their
I
different
think it's more,
beliefs.
even though I wouldn't consider it with this new wave of like highbrow horror by any means. I think it might have been the start of where you really could embed more societal messages,
Yeah.
especially with the remake. Because I think that did precede like when we started to get the Babadook. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, that is to me the ultimate representation of highbrow horror
Yeah.
and next level horror, elevated horror, if
Elevated
you
her.
will.
That's what it is. Yeah.
That's the term. But I think Hills Have Eyes starts to do that, and you almost have a little sympathy for those who've been nuked, even though what they do to these family is just
Right.
horrible. And again,
Yeah.
you have another kind of scarecrow moment with the father being burned at the
Oh
stake, sort of
man.
stuff. And I would say it's probably the most grisly of our top road trip movies.
I'd say so. Yeah. Most graphic, even though Rob Zombie's is up there, but this one,
Right.
and this is Alexander Aja,
Right.
great
Yeah.
director.
And then finally, let's talk about the one which I think is my favorite of them all.
Okay.
If we're just talking road trip horror, because of course I love Texas Chainsaw, and that first one is just a masterpiece. But I remember Children of the Corn really affecting me when I was younger.
Yeah.
Just the whole idea of kids running a town and sacrificing adults because even themselves they can't live beyond 13, so they have this really regimented sense of life.
Right.
Sacrificing adults to their demonoid deity was scary just to see kids be the big bad.
Absolutely. It's
And just the idea, because here we have the couple who's driving across country for a new job, it's a new beginning, thwarted by the youngins.
yeah.
Again, you might have metaphors going on there too, in that I don't know, when you think about getting a job and stuff, all the youngins are kind of taking the jobs and putting the old guys out to pasture, sort of thing. And of course, we're talking about Stephen King here, so it's going to be halfway decent no matter what.
Absolutely, and yes, there is something very terrifying about a group of children who basically incredibly influential by the boy preacher
Right.
Isaac,
Yes.
and to do his bidding. I mean, it's very scary.
It is. No, I think it tops the charts in terms of scare factor. Granted, it does have supernatural forces, so I'm not going to put it above a Chainsaw Massacre in the grander scheme of things. But for our road trip and what it did to me in my youth, I gotta give a lot of credit. Aren't they making a remake of this or no?
They have. They have. They've remade it. They remade it like, God, maybe 10 years ago, and they shot it in like parts of it in Illinois and Iowa.
Oh wow!
I remember because I had like friends who were working on it, but I don't know if there's talks of. See, to me,
I don't think it was that big of a hit, was it?
no,
The remake.
but to me, you've got an opportunity here to maybe do like a series.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
'cause
Absolutely.
you've got a lot to work with here. Gatlin, the town of Gatlin, and I mean the names.
Nebraska's scary.
Yeah,
Driving through Nebraska is not fun. I remember thinking to myself, "Wow, if I broke down here, I got 70 miles before the next stop or
Right.
whatever." That was, it spooks you. It spooks
It
you a
is,
little bit.
and it's that's the funny thing about a lot of road trips is a lot of things have to happen. They have to cut through middle America here, and I think that's what's so interesting about things breaking down in the middle of America, where it's like the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, and this was even before like how divisive things are now politically. You know what I mean? You know, city slicker getting stuck in zones that they shouldn't. I think Chuck Palahniuk's father dealt with some folks in Idaho that killed him.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's definitely a good road trip movie. Granted, a lot of these start as road trips and then turn into something else, but the driving vehicle of what brings them to the horror is often a road trip.
Absolutely.
With few exceptions like the joy rides, which is the whole time they're on the road, or even the midnight ride, the whole time they're on the road. But yeah, I'm kind of glad I'm not going on a road trip this summer, as far as I know.
Yeah, now that we've talked about it. And to bring things full circle, I was referencing at the very beginning the gasoline prices in the movie. It was Joyride, and they pull into the location where Rusty Nail wants them to take their clothes off and go into the diner.
Right.
The gas prices in the background are like $1.32, and it's just so sad.
Them's were the days.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's hard to believe. Granted, he made less money back then in theory, and I don't know. But yeah, compared to now, it's pretty different. But I think we've done covered this.
I think so too. And there are a couple honorable mentions. Like I know the Hitcher. People might be like, "Why didn't you guys talk about the Hitcher?" But we wanted to, kind of focus on things that you may not have seen, and certainly it turned into some of the ones that we have seen.
Right.
Yeah, there's. I mean, I hope that they continue to build this subgenre out. Like, maybe
there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them that we don't even have on the list.
Yeah.
I think it's a tried and true subgenre that we will see.
Yeah,
it's gonna happen because you're just so vulnerable on the road.
Absolutely.
I think that's the point of it. There's such vulnerability. You're out there in that little tin box on wheels,
and something has to happen to your car.
Zones. Yeah. Oh, I know. So much car trouble in my day. But anyways, thanks for listening, folks.
Thank you.
And
drive safely, buckle up,
and stay alive.